unmuted. You good for me to do a little introduction? Well, good afternoon, evening. I never know what the difference between afternoon and evening, like what that dividing line is. That was 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock is like evening. So we're going to say good afternoon because we have 25 more minutes left in the afternoon before we turn into the evening. And I thank you all for being here. I've been with Avira now for the 2 days. So she was talking last night for the high school youth group, and we were around 8th graders all day today. And somehow she still has energy. She's still here. So she's been doing awesome, and we're so happy to have Avira here to come and talk to the good people at St. Margaret Mary. Just full of life. It's been, I'm trying to remember, we were talking with my friend Chris. We found each other on Instagram, and I went, you need to come and talk to my parish. You need to share your story. It's such an incredible witness in the midst of the church and the world, and I'm so grateful to have you here. And as I'm sure all of you know, we'll be talking about the church and same-sex attraction. And I want to preface, just before we dive into Avira's talk tonight, which will be much more powerful than really any words that I have to really share right now, but just to give a preface, to start off with any preconceived notions of what you have going into tonight's talk, any fears, anxieties, worries, any thoughts of, I don't know, like reservation, anything that's kind of just clouding your heart right now, to have that openness, to just be at peace. This is it's going to be a beautiful night. And I also I felt called to share a very quick story as something that has very much affected us here in Orlando, and just to give witness to how we as Catholics can recognize the dignity of the human person, especially for those who struggle with same-sex attraction. And many of you all remember back in 2016, I remembered as the time I was away in Guatemala on Spanish immersion when the Pulse nightclub shooting happened, which is a terrible, tragic event. And I want to make sure that we all know what the church's response in the diocese was. So Bishop Noonan was actually on a red-eye flight to California for a bishops' conference. And when he landed in California, he then, turned on your phone and he realized what had happened. He didn't even leave the airport. He booked another flight, came right back to Orlando, and the cathedral, St. James, held the first prayer service for the victims at the Pulse nightclub shooting because we recognize their dignity. We had several priests who were assigned to the trauma center who was there to minister to the needs of the family members who had lost loved ones there that night. We did many of their funerals. We had that love, care, and compassion for them. And it's with that, I hope that we can have that mindset of these are people who need to be loved and respected. And my genuine hope, having Avira come and talk tonight, is that we can recognize that this is a conversation that we need to be having. This is a conversation we need to be having at the forefront. And we have lovely people like Avira who are here to talk to us tonight. So my hope is that we can have that open heart and that genuineness to welcome her. So why don't we start out with a prayer? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for the gift of your daughter, Avira. We ask for you to bless her throughout this night. We ask that our hearts might be open and that you might set our hearts aflame with your love, that this conversation might be rooted in you alone, you who are the way, the truth, and the life. May this open up conversations and avenues for us to continue to act in charity towards every single person that we meet, every single person made in your image and likeness, a person to be encountered, to be loved, to be cherished, to be nurtured. May we turn to you in all things, that we may remain close to your most sacred heart. We ask all these things in your holy name. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. And now you're not going to listen to me talk the rest of the night unless Avira tells me to.
I'll probably ask your input at some point. Yeah, I have this one. Okay, can everybody hear me? Well, okay, can everybody see me too? I know the lighting is a little bit off. Is this okay? All right, I just wanted to make sure. Can I just say that I've done this for 6 years, right? So I've traveled all over the country, speaking in different places and everything. Winter Park has to be one of the most beautiful destinations I have ever been to in my entire life. Like, I called my sister, we do this thing wherever I go somewhere, and it's like super nice. Like, I called her, I was like sitting in the park up there, because I'm staying at the Park Plaza. So I've been able to walk to everything. Like, I called my sister, I was like, sis, they put me up, they did. Like, all the stuff, I had to show her my room and all of that. So like, we just had this beautiful conversation. But one of the things that I look forward to every time I go somewhere, honestly, is the people. So I've been privileged enough to do this for, I said, 6 years. And one of the things that I tend to take away the most is there's always some like group of people or like one person that I always like become really good friends with. afterwards. And it's always such a pleasure to me to, but it's also a bit taxing because I leave my heart everywhere. Like all these people have my heart, and I'm just like, I just hope our paths cross again, or I hope, like we're able to see each other very soon, or things like that. So not only did Father Adam and I meet on Instagram, but actually Peyton and I know each other because we graduated high school together. So we went to the same school. We're both from Mobile, Alabama. So that's how I met Peyton. And I just remember all these things coming together when I figured out that I was coming here. And I've been so excited. And I've been praying for all of you. And I'm just thankful that each and every one of you showed up. By the way, this is also one of the largest crowds, or at least like parish crowds, that I've ever been to. So I'm low-key shocked at how many people are here right now. So I hope the nerves don't get to me at some point in the talk. So first and foremost, I want to thank you all for being here. Because I can only imagine what it must have felt like to maybe have somebody's going to talk about it. Somebody's going to bring it up. Somebody's going to say, the God-forsaken words like same-sex attraction, homosexuality, gay, trans, bi, like we're going to talk about it, right? But I want to make sure that we talk about it in the context of Christ, right? Because we can't leave him out of any circumstance. We can't leave him out of any part of our lives. And I think that that's one of the things that confused me at first, because I was young. When I first noticed my attractions at all, I was maybe around the age of 12 or 13, when I first recognized it. Now, I grew up Catholic, right? So I went to Little Flower Catholic School. I went with Peyton to McGill-Tulane. I had that formal basis, that Catholic education. However, homosexuality was never spoken about. Like never, ever, ever. And if it was spoken about, it was whispered around via the students. It was never something talked about in my religion classes. It was never even something that I heard was brought up. I've actually become friends with some of the teachers at McGill, and one of the ladies, I've actually become really good friends with, Mrs. Evans. She hates it when I call her that. It's Christy now, but it's still knee-jerk reaction is Mrs. Evans. But I asked her at one point, I said, if you had known, what would you have said to me? If you had known about that I was struggling with this, what would you have said? And she looked at me very honestly and said, I don't know. I don't know what I could have said to you, not only in the context of my job, but what have been helpful for you at 17. What could I have said to respond to what you were telling me in that way? So one of the things that I find is my mission, because I love talking to 8th graders as well as I went today, or I love talking to high school students. But in my own ministry, I find that these are the most important talks that I give, because I see parents, I see family members, I see aunts and uncles, cousins, grandparents, relatives of all kinds. I see friends. Possibly even spouses, that have this experience in some way, or have directly encountered, somebody or even themselves who struggle in some capacity with homosexuality or gender discordance, and they just have no idea what to do, especially within the context of the church. So I've tried to make it my personal duty to share what that's been like with me, how I grew up in the Catholic Church, and now how people in the church have encountered me and welcomed me into a walk with Christ that has led me to where I am now. Right? And one of the things that I want to do is I want to break out this fun little thing. So this is, if you don't know, this is the Catechism of the Catholic Church. This is actually Ascension Press's new one. I got a forwarded copy, and I've been looking through it, and it felt so cool that I was on their marketing list or whatever. But so this is the Catechism of the Catholic Church. This is everything that we believe as Catholics, right? And there are 3 passages of the Catechism that talk about homosexuality explicitly, right? So I want to give us the chance to go through it, because if you don't realize, the Catechism was not necessarily meant for lay eyes, right? It was meant for the hierarchy. It was meant for the clergy. So now you have people with catechisms in their homes, but not a lot of resources to be able to use it or to understand it. So what I want to do is take these verses and explain them as a person who actually deals with this. Because one of the things that I have encountered is like, who actually believes that? You know, like who, and not just people in the church, like who actually deals with that? Who actually has that experience and believes in it? And I guarantee you there are many of us. You know, there are many of us in the church that do. Many of us are hidden. Maybe some of us hidden in plain sight. You know, like you never know, right? Because the experience itself does not discriminate, is one of the things that I will say. Like, my parents were pretty shocked when I first told them. But, you know, again, and it wasn't something that I expected, and it also wasn't something that I asked for. So I want to go bit by bit, verse by verse, and explain not only what the church teaches, but why. And explain it all in the context of my life. And you'll also be able to get to know me a little bit throughout the process. Okay, so if you wanted to know, these are Catechism verses 2357 through verse 2359. So we're going to start, and I'm going to read bit by bit and hopefully explain a little bit throughout. All right, so this is the first section. This is 2357. So, homosexuality refers to relations between men or between women who experience an exclusive or predominant sexual attraction towards person of the same sex. So that essentially means like somebody could have either like they have no attraction to the opposite sex whatsoever, or you can have somebody like me who has a predominant sexual attraction to the other sex, but not exclusive. Right, so I still have some attraction towards men. Fun fact, I actually still hope to be married one day. So we'll see if that happens. If y'all want to offer me any of your grandsons or anything. I'm 26. I like long walks on the beach. I come from a great family. We do Mardi Gras every year, so whatever. But it has taken a great variety of forms throughout the centuries and in different cultures. Its psychological genesis remains largely unexplained. The church is essentially saying, we don't know how this happens. Like we don't fully have an understanding of how it occurs or why, right? So, and then truth be told, there's not a lot of studying going on in reference to how this might happen, because then it would mean that, oh, there's something wrong. And, you know, nobody wants to say that there's something wrong, you know. So again, there's not a lot of knowledge surrounding how this happens or how it manifests in a person. There are plenty of, you know, different people like philosophizing or different things like that. So for me, I know I was exposed to pornography very young. I was 6 years old. So having a very, very early sex addiction probably allowed my brain or my sexual desires to deviate. You know, so, and the way that they deviated might be different in some people than it was for me, you know, so I know that the father wound is a big deal in the LGBTQ community across the board, across men and women. But I have a friend of mine who actually speaks on the same topic as me, Emmanuel Gonzalez. He's getting his master's degree at Franciscan University of Steubenville right now. He has a great relationship with his dad, and has for the majority of his life, you know, to much of his knowledge. So, and he still experiences this. So it could be a variety of different things. So its psychological genesis remains largely, very largely unexplained. Basing itself on sacred scripture, which presents homosexual acts as acts of grave depravity. Tradition has always declared that homosexual acts are intrinsically disordered. Please hear me clearly when I say this. Homosexual acts are disordered, not the person who is experiencing them. Right? There's nothing wrong with me. There are probably some people who would disagree with that for a variety of reasons, but there is nothing inherently wrong with me as a person. There's something wrong with the desire itself. So I believe even based in somewhere else in the Catechism, it says it's intrinsically disordered to lie. You know, is there something wrong with every person who tells a lie? No. That's a temptation as any other, right? Father Mike Schmitz has a fantastic talk about this on YouTube, and he says if it wasn't same-sex attraction, it would be something else. We all struggle with something. right? There is temptation all in this room. It doesn't have to be this one in particular, right? So again, there is nothing inherently wrong with me, and I am not sinning just because this is my particular cross, right? And I will say this too, I did not ask for this. I didn't wake up one Tuesday morning and decide to like girls, because it definitely made my life a great deal harder, right? Not even right now in high school, even in grade school. And unfortunately, I have parents emailing me or getting my information and saying, my son or my daughter is 12, or my son is 10 or 9 years old, and saying certain things. No. So there is nothing wrong inherently with the person who is experiencing these desires. It is the desire itself that is wrong. And I'll add to that, desires themselves are neutral. Right? So just because you have the desire to do something that's sinful does not automatically mean that you are sinning. The acts themselves are what become sinful or not. Right? So again, just because I have the desire to rob a bank, sometimes I'm poor, so I'm just maybe like there's a Regions up the street. Like I'm sure they got money. Just because the desire is there does not mean that I am inherently sinning. Now, if I go up to that Regions and rob the bank, probably unsuccessfully because I'd give all the money back because I have a guilty conscience. But if I actually go and do that action, that's the sinful part. Right? So I want to make sure that we make that distinction between desire and act. And then the desire between person and desire. Our identity is not rooted in our desires. So one of the big issues that I have with LGBTQ ideology as a whole is that they see someone like me and they see a gay person. That's not who I am at all. You cannot identify me or look at me and say like, oh, and I've literally had people say like, oh, she's gay, and then treat me differently. Or whether it was quote unquote good or bad, right? You can't look at that one aspect of my person and decide to treat me a certain way. This goes for anything. I don't know if you noticed, but I'm black. But I'm not a black person, right? My personhood is not rooted in that. All that means is that my ancestors were near the equator and it made their skin dark. That's all that is, right? Or I have like a particular culture, like, I hated getting left out of black family gatherings, so I learned how to play spades. So I don't know if y'all do that, but that was one of the things that I had to learn. Or what was it? I got like my black card revoked. So I got it revoked when I was 9 because I hate watermelon, but that's against the point. But again, you can't look at me and say like, oh, she's black, so I'm going to treat her a certain way. Or like, oh, such and such person is Republican, I'm going to treat them a certain way. That's a big deal, especially every 4 years, right? The way that we treat people should be based off of the reality that they have inherent dignity because they were created in the image and likeness of God. If you want to know what my identity is, it's that there. That he created me in his image, and he thought it was necessary that I exist. And not only thought it was necessary that I exist, but thought it was good that I exist. And thought that the world would be different without me. And that is the same truth for all of us. That we exist and that it is good that we exist. And the world would be different without us. Right? Let's continue on. They are contrary to the natural law. So essentially we have a law written in our hearts, right? Is that marriage is between one man and one woman. So if you take any part of that away, whether it's sex outside of marriage in the sense of a husband sleeps with another woman that's not his wife, contraception, abortion, like it is all the same thing. It is using sex for a purpose that it was not intended. It is using the marital act. So you know there are two pillars of marriage. It is the union of the spouses and procreation. If you take one or both of those away, you are using the marital act for a purpose that it was not intended. So that's why it is the same sin committed differently. It is the same sin committed differently. So why, maybe in some places in the world, I'll be discriminated against, if you want to bring up discrimination in every conversation that we ever have. If I can walk into a confessional, or say, I'll give you this example. A man walks into a confessional and says, Father, I slept with somebody that wasn't my wife. You know, I'm sure you get a stern talking to, have a severe penance, maybe marital counseling, all these things, sends him on his way. I walk into that same confessional. Father, I slept with a woman that was not my wife. Oh, that's fine. I mean, you can't control your desires. I literally had this happen to me in a confessional. And I was extremely hurt by it. But imagine a person who maybe isn't blessed with the same experiences that I've had or the faith that I've been given. And they walk out of the confessional thinking a lie, believing a lie. That they could just do something that is against the will of God. That's not charitable by any means. You're letting somebody walk into something that is going to hurt them in one way or another. And that's not fair. If we're going to talk about fairness, that's not fair. It's not good and it's not just. They close the sexual act to the gift of life. Again, using something for the purpose it was not intended. They do not proceed from a genuine, affective, and sexual complementarity. Guys, we complement each other. We don't complete each other. We complement each other. And you can't screw two screws together or put two bolts together. It just doesn't work. And under no circumstances can they be approved. Meaning, no matter what group tries to come in and say, oh, give the church 50 years, she'll change. No, she won't. No, she won't. Because her bridegroom, Jesus Christ, is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So his bride will not change for anyone. And he wouldn't ask her to change because she's perfect. Right? So she does not have to change. And if people try to swear up and down, listen, this church has survived communism. This church has survived, I'm bad at church history. But has survived itself. Of people attacking it within, absolutely. Has survived different cultures trying everything in their power to destroy her. One of my favorite quotes is, the soil under the church is soaked by the blood of the martyrs. Right? There are people who will die for this and have died for this. I want to say there's at least, to our knowledge, is over 1 million martyrs in the church today. Over 1 million. Of people who have willingly given their lives to testify that not only Jesus Christ is Lord, but this church is the one true church. Have given their lives, have sacrificed everything in order to testify to that. So she's not going anywhere or changing anything anytime soon. All right, so that's 2357. Let's walk on to 2358. The number of men and women who have deep-seated homosexual tendencies is not negligible. So how many people experience it? And I will say experience it honestly, because the actual number of people who experience same-sex attraction, like legitimately, is fairly low. It's not like a 1 in 6 statistic, but I will say there's a lot of a social contagion, especially for young people. Like, it's cool to be gay. It's cool to be trans. It's weird if you're not at this point. It's weird to be straight, cisgender, whatever words they want to come up with next. So there is a huge social contagion, but I'm talking about the people who experience it very honestly. So that number is not negligible. This inclination, which is objectively disordered, constitutes for most of them a trial. I'll attest to that. It sucks. It does not feel good most of the time. Right? Especially because I experienced it so young. They must be accepted with respect, compassion, and sensitivity. Now, I want to talk specifically about that word respect or compassion. Do we know what that word compassion means? Yeah, and my grandma's Baptist, so talk to me, yell at me. If you did, that's what I'm used to. That's kind of what I grew up with. So, do we know what that word compassion means? To walk with. Who said? Somebody said it. To suffer with. To suffer with. That's what the Latin root of that word, that's what it comes from. So when we talk about being compassionate, you may not know the right words to say at the time. But I'll tell you something that did not fail for me. I have a friend of mine who struggles with the same thing as I do. And we were just talking one day. And by the way, he's much younger than me, which makes what he said all the more brilliant. It just is a testament to how wise of a human being he is. I was talking to him about some girl at work. And I was just like, I'm just so infatuated. I don't know what to do. I just want to quit that job, but I need the money, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going over this whole spiel with him. And he says to me, there's not really much I can say, but here, I will ache with you. I will ache with you. I swear, that was one of the most powerful things I had ever heard in my entire life. Was he didn't try in that moment to console me, right? He didn't quote scripture to me. He didn't remind me, well, the catechism said this. That wouldn't have been beneficial in that moment. Because again, I know this. I've done this for 6 years. I know this. But what I needed to hear in that moment is I just needed to know that not only was I seen and heard and understood, but that somebody was in it with me and I wasn't alone. I cannot tell you, I cannot express in words how isolating it can be, especially in the church today, to struggle with this. And it was infinitely worse when I was 17. No one really knew. I felt like I couldn't talk to anyone. Or people were going to, I remember I went to a Catholic high school, remember? Went to a Catholic high school, and I was in class one day, and one guy who was a grade above me, he came into one of my classes today, and he looked really sad, and I was like, hey, what's going on? And he just walked in, and he was like, oh, so-and-so called me a fag in the hallway. This is at a Catholic high school. I didn't want to be called names or treated differently because of something I didn't ask for, because of something I didn't choose for myself. So what was I supposed to do but just sit there and rot and not tell anyone? And not talk to anybody and not feel like I had anywhere to go, anywhere to be heard or consoled or anything like that. So for him to say something that powerful to say, there's not much that I can do, but I can ache with you. I can hurt with you. Sometimes that's the gospel, guys. Sometimes in that moment, that is all you need to say. Is that maybe I'll never understand. Or maybe I'll never experience this. And I don't have the right words to say, but let's just ache together. Let's just let it hurt together so you don't have to be alone. Even if it's for 5 minutes. Right? That one conversation changed a lot for me. I definitely questioned if I could keep doing things like this. But I kept going because of that conversation. Because he witnessed to me. Right? That was exactly what I needed in that moment. Every sign of unjust discrimination in their regard should be avoided. There is a difference now between just and unjust discrimination. There's a distinct difference, right? I know we talked about y'all's grandsons or the guys that y'all knew earlier. Listen, I'm going to discriminate if I don't like something or I think that we just don't match up. Like, I have a right to be choosy in who I spend the rest of my life with. We have a right to be discriminatory in some ways. But again, there's a difference between being just and unjust when we discriminate. Right, if there's a person who we know is experiencing this, or we're just, I don't really want to talk about it, so maybe I'm just not going to invite them to dinner, or I'm not going to invite them to Bible study, or I'm not going to put them in this position in the church, or I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to do that, that is unjust. Right? If they are actively trying to live out church teaching, and we try to discriminate against them in that way. Or, I'll tell you the truth, even if they're not, right? We may not put them in certain positions in the church, but not having them in our homes, not speaking to them because their views are different than ours. I literally have an aunt that said she does not have any Republican friends. Does not have any Republican friends because she's like, oh, these people are like this or these people like that. Listen, there is somebody with a Confederate flag in their front yard that has had me over for Easter because I was away from home. Right? And now I'm not the biggest fan of the Confederate flag, but I know that I am a big fan of being invited into someone's home for dinner and for fellowship. Because she knew that I was 3 hours away from home. I was living in Baton Rouge at the time. And she said, please come over and have Easter dinner with us. Right? There's power in that, of communicating with each other. And I guarantee you, even if you want to evangelize or you want to hopefully pray for their conversion or bring them into the church, let me assure you of this. You cannot speak truth into a situation you know nothing about. So if you don't take the time to hear them, if you don't take the time to try and understand where it is that they're coming from, you will never be able to speak truth into that. A prime example of this. There was a young guy that I met at a conference a few years back, and he thought that he was transgender, thought that he was female. And I was asking him about it. And one of the things that he said to me was, I just feel like I have a woman's heart. And I was like, well, what do you mean by that? Just talk to me. What does that mean? And he said, well, a woman's heart is just so compassionate. It's so kind. It's so nurturing. And I was like, that's it. He has never met a man with those qualities. Never in his life. And this man was in his 20s back then. So he has to be in his 30s now. Had never met a man that was kind to him, was compassionate, was nurturing. So he thought that he had to be female. How sick and twisted and sad is that? That he had never had anyone in his life to be, and I'll say it, be masculine to him. Because all it means to be masculine or feminine is for a man or a woman to be and possess virtue. The virtues are not gender specific. So a man being courageous and a woman being courageous are the same virtue expressed by different people. So a man can be kind, can be nurturing, can learn all these things that may be more commonly attributed to women, right? But that's what makes community so important, right? As I learned many things about courage, about strength from men in my life who were courageous, who were strong. But you know who also was very strong and courageous? My mom. My mom was a social worker for 29 years. Right? She just retired, and we got her like a little golden doodle, so she's probably living her best life, taking the dog out right now. For 29 years, worked with kids who had been abused, right? Had kids that had to sleep in her office because they had nowhere to go. Helped at the food stamp office. That's strength. That's courage. And it was done by a woman. So the virtues are not gender specific. And to be masculine is not to be the biggest guy in the room. Because you can be the most muscular guy at the gym and go home and be a jerk to your family. And a man can be a little bit more autistic or flamboyant, but still take care of the people around him. And in my humble opinion, the latter is the masculine man. Because he has the virtues to love the people around him. And the other guy apparently not. Right? These persons are called to fulfill God's will in their lives and, if they are Christians, to unite to the sacrifice of the Lord's cross the difficulties they may encounter from their condition. All that means is that I am called to the same thing as all of you. I am called to do the very same thing. I am called to be like Christ. That's it. It's as simple as that. Now, may it look differently for me? Yes. You know, I told you guys earlier that I would love to be married, but let's say I'm not. There was a circumstance, I believe it was during World War II, that I heard about this story, that there were many young women who were either newly married or engaged to be married or were dating, and their husbands or their boyfriends or fiancés went off to war and never came back, right? Never returned. So they were faced with, you know, do I potentially meet someone else? But many of them remained single. Some of them, I believe, took on vocations, but others were just women in the community, right? Because they were like, well, I wanted to give my heart to this man, but now he's gone. So you have to, I'm a big fan of Tolkien, right? I'm a big fan of Tolkien. So that beautiful quote that Gandalf says in The Lord of the Rings, right, in the Fellowship of the Ring, when Frodo was saying, I wish it had never happened in my time. And Gandalf says, so does everyone who lives to see such times. But our task is to do with the time that has been given to us. I have to do with the season of life that I'm in, with the place in life that I'm in. I had a friend of mine who she was speaking at a women's conference in San Antonio on this topic, and she ended up having something come up, and she had to pull out a month in advance. So she called me and is like, hey, can you fill in for me next month at this conference? And guess what? I didn't have to call a babysitter. I didn't have to make sure my husband didn't burn the house down while I was gone. All I did was have to say, bye, Mom and Dad, and then I left. Right? And I went. There was another circumstance. This was maybe sometime last year or earlier this year. A friend of mine had a conference that she was putting on for the teachers in her diocese. It was a Catholic school. It was actually the last black Catholic school in the Diocese of Lafayette, which was very, very cool. This was like an hour away from me where I was living in Baton Rouge. Her keynote speaker pulled out the day before. But I had met her roommate at a party the month prior. So her roommate calls me and is like, girl, what are you doing tomorrow? And I was like, what are we doing, Mark? Like, what are we doing? And she was like, no, my roommate had their keynote speaker pull out the day before. Can you speak at this event tomorrow? Sure. Yeah, called out of work the next day and I went. Right? They paid me more at the event. So, all that to say, I have the ability to do that because I have no other restraints, right? I have the ability, I have that freedom to kind of come and go as I please because I don't have anybody else that directly depends on me, you know? So if the rest of my life is spent doing things like this, I have lived and lived life to the full. I don't need to have a husband for my life to be validated. I don't need to be married for my life to have a purpose. And there are plenty of single people in this church who feel like their position in life or who they are is not wanted because they're not married, right? There was a friend of mine who, she's a speaker as well, and she was visiting a friend, and the friend was saying, like, my son, thinks he's gay, and he thinks he's going to be single for the rest of his life. And my friend Meg was like, well, why don't you introduce him to some of your single friends that are in the church? They're living very fruitful lives. Why don't you maybe have them over for dinner, just so he can, get his bearings, this person. And the lady responded, what single friends? What single friends? She didn't have any to introduce our son to that were living faithfully Catholic lives that had a single vocation. She didn't know any of them. And I guarantee you it's not because they weren't there. Right? There was a girl that DM'd me on Instagram years ago. And she said that she had grown up Catholic. She had gone away from the church, had been in a long relationship with another girl. She broke it off because she wanted to come back to church. She started coming back. She went to the same mass, sat in the same place at the same church every week for a month. And then she decided to leave the church again because even though she went to the same parish at the same time, sat in the same place for a month, no one came up and introduced themselves to her. She was like, I can go be lonely on my own. I don't need this, right? And we know that Christ is the source and summit of our faith. But people who might be coming through those doors might not. And unless we are the gospel to them, they might never know. You don't understand how you might be affecting someone's salvation by simply introducing yourself. You have no idea how powerful that can be. There might be people who might be banking on that. So I think that we need to get a little better about if you see someone you don't know, if you see someone here you don't know, I want to see some introductions happening. I want to see, who are we inviting to dinner next weekend? I wish I could stay, but I have to go home tomorrow. But I wish I could stay, and I wish I could sit down and eat with every single one of you. But when I'm gone, see introductions happening all over the place. Remember, parishes were meant to be an extension of the family. So we need to be a lot more familial with each other. Familiar and familial. Now, this is the last paragraph. This is 2359. Homosexual persons are called to chastity. Now, I know the church is never going to change her teachings. But if there was one thing that I could change in the catechism, it would be this sentence. Because again, as I stated earlier, I am not a homosexual person. Right? I am a beloved daughter of God. Point blank period, that's it. So, Jason Everett actually put this really well. He said there are only 3 types of persons, right? There are divine persons. These are the 3 persons of the Most Holy Trinity. So, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. There are angelic persons, so either angel or demon. And then there are human persons, either male or female. That's it. There are only 2 ways that humanity can be expressed. It's either male or female. Right? This is a biological reality that cannot be changed. It is an immutable characteristic of who we are as people. It cannot be changed. It can also not be reduced to anything else. Again, I am not my sexual orientation. I am not my race. I am not my interests. I am not my failings. I am not my victories. I am who my Father says that I am. And I should be treated as such. And every single one of you should be treated as such. So all persons in any state of life are called to chastity. Right? Same as me. By the virtues of self-mastery that teach them inner freedom, and at times by the support of disinterested friendship. So all that means is that you're not trying to get something out of a person. So you're not interested in that person as, oh, because they have a nice house, or oh, because they know this person, or oh, they can do this for me. Like, no, you were interested in that person for them, who they are as people. That's all that disinterested means. By prayer and sacramental grace, they can and should gradually and resolutely approach Christian perfection. This is what the church teaches about me, right? It never said, oh, this person is broken beyond repair. Oh, this person is so dismal, so lowly. That's not who I am. There is a priest, and I'm not going to name names. I forget what diocese he's even in, but he's a religious priest anyway, so it doesn't matter. But there is a priest who in this country will tell you that I cannot enter into Christianity at all, or like anything like that, or it's a hindrance to me because I can't be in a relationship with a woman. Or like, why it's so cruel that you would do this to somebody or tell them that their desires are disordered. Why would you ever do that to somebody? Guess what? Christianity without the cross is nothing. Is nothing. Right? There is always going to be some form of suffering involved. This is just the particular way that I suffered. And there are plenty other ways that I suffer, right? But Christ is trying to tell the world, she is mine. And I don't care what she's dealing with. I will give her the grace. I will give her the grace to come home to me. One of my favorite scenes in the gospel is when Jesus is flipping tables, in the temple, right? One of the reasons I love that is because it bears such beautiful symbolism to my own life. That he says that my body, my humanity, I myself am a temple. And anything that does not belong there, I will throw out. I will cast it out. Because nothing that would turn her away from me, the one who has loved her beyond anything that she has ever done, does not belong there. That bears immeasurable meaning in my life. And is actually a big reason behind my name. So I know Peyton's probably been struggling, but you knew me by another name, when I was in school. So Vera Maria Santo is actually not my birth name. It's not on my license or anything. Like it's a name that I took on. The name of Vera means transgressus, or sinful woman in Hebrew. And I felt that was a very, very fitting name for me at the time. It's still very fitting to me to this day. Maria obviously pays homage to Our Lady, but also means one who bears light, or light bearer. And then Santo obviously means saint. So even in my name tells my story. Then I am a sinner who desires to be a saint. Right? There's actually there's a Latin root of the name of Vera. It's avare, which means to long for, to crave, or desire. So not only am I aware of the transformation that must take place in my life every single day, but I'm also aware that there is still a desire to be a saint. And I never want to forget that. Despite the horrible things that have happened to me or the horrible things that I have done, I am never beyond redemption. I am never beyond being with my first love, with my greatest love forever. The last thing I want to leave y'all with, and if we have time, we can do some Q&A. But I love Christian literature. I especially love fictional literature, fictional Christian literature. And one of my favorite series of all time, if you remember, is The Chronicles of Narnia. Right? Now, there is a beautiful, beautiful scene in The Chronicles of Narnia where, if you remember, the 4 Pevensey kids, so Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy, they're sitting in the home of Mr. and Mrs. Beaver, who have found them out in the cold, fed them, and they're telling the Pevensey kids about Aslan. You know, about this great figure who's going to come and save Narnia from the winter that never ends. Right? That Narnia was going to be launched into a new springtime. And it was all going to be at Aslan's hand. And one of the Pevensey kids says, so is Aslan safe? Is Aslan safe? And Mr. Beaver is like, have you heard nothing that we've been telling you? No, he's not safe. He's a wild lion, for crying out loud. Of course he isn't safe. But he's good. But he's good. I guarantee you the life I lead is not a safe one. The life we lead as Christians, especially as Catholics, is by no means safe. And by the way that the world is going, it's probably going to get a lot worse. But we have to remember, and this is what I try to keep in mind all the time. I follow these teachings because I know that the one who said them is good and cannot be outdone in generosity. And he loved me to the point where he would give his own life for me in place of me, so that when I breathe my last, I can hear those words, well done, good and faithful servant. Right? Well done, good and faithful servant. And not only that, but the cross is the most beautiful expression of the words, I love you. Right? I love you. Never before has a religion or like something that we profess used the instrument of torture that our professed Savior died on as our price tag. Say like, this is what I'm worth. The death of my God was warranted for me by him himself. So I don't care what it is that you're struggling with. I don't care what you've done or what's been done to you. You are loved beyond measure, beyond reason. And this is the same God who gave me these difficult and these tough teachings, but only because he can't imagine eternity without me. And he thought it was necessary, not only that I exist, but that I return to him. He does not want heaven without me, and he does not want heaven without you. If you remember nothing else from this talk, remember that. So I'm going to leave some time for Q&A. I know there's a mic up here, but I can just kind of go around, but I want y'all to be able to hear the questions as well. And I'll be hanging around afterwards, too. Thank you. Thank y'all. Yeah, we can pass that around, or people can just, either one.
First, I just want to thank you for coming and joining with us tonight. I was enjoying every second of that talk, and I was enjoying just being here. And I've had the pleasure of being with her like all day long, and so just, you can tell she's a pretty wonderful person. If there are any questions, and then I'll also have this basket I'm going to put on a chair in the back. If you would like to make a free will donation to help and support her ministry and what she does, to be able to do more, you are welcome to. You don't have to, but if you would like to support her, feel called, please, you are welcome to share one. I'll put this in the back. Did anyone have any questions before before we close out. Like she said, you might want to talk to her afterwards. She's going to stick around. So if you're like, I'd rather have a one-on-one conversation, feel free to do that as well.
I'll also say there's no questions that are off limits. I told the kids earlier, I've literally been asked about my sex life in front of like 300, like I think they were 8th to 12th graders at one point when I was in Texas speaking. So I'm an open book. I don't care. So please, at your discretion, ask me whatever.
All right, I have a question.
Oh, for sure. Hi, what's your name?
My name's Tim.
Hi, nice to meet you, Mr.
And thank
Tim.
you for doing the retreat today. My daughter was at the retreat today
Oh,
and spoke
beautiful.
very highly
Okay.
of you,
Oh.
so thank you for doing that.
Yeah,
My question is, was there a turning point, an event, or a person that kind of guided you to the church? It seems, there's easy way out of everything these days, and it's easy for kids to kind of turn away from the church. So for you, was there something specific that led you to the church?
Yeah. My high school chaplain, actually. He's like, Mr. Father, I was like, yeah. His name is Father Dan. And I went into his office one day, it was my senior year, had tears in my eyes. And I don't cry in front of people. I just don't. Like, it's not something that I do. But I went into his office with tears in my eyes, just saying, like, Father Dan, I think I'm gay, and I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And he just looked at me. He started giggling at first. I was like, Father Dan, I need you to be serious, my boy. Like, I'm spilling my heart to you right now. And he looked at me and said, you are so good. You are so good, and nothing, no one, no struggle, no anything can take that from you. That was the first thing he thought to say. But that one occurrence led to years of a relationship that I built with this man, to the point where I see him for spiritual direction to this day. Right? Like, and when I leave here, I'm literally going to spiritual direction with him. But a friend of mine was like, you just needed someone good to remind you of how good you are. And that was a little bit of a play on words, because his name is Father Dan Good. So, but he is one of my favorite people, and I love him like the father that he is. And like I said, he started a relationship with me. He said, like, after you graduate, let's start meeting, like once or twice a week or once or twice a month. And, let me help you through this. Let me walk with you through this. And he, like, not only transformed my life, but if I'm honest, he saved it. So. Any more?
Do you ever think about, even if you don't get married, about maybe even adopting a child?
I don't know. I mean, like, it has been something that I thought about. But like Father Adam said, he said that I have 500 kids, and I feel like in a way I'm the same way, like by nature of me being a woman, I'm already a mother, because there are people who entrust themselves to me, whether they're my biological children or not. Like I worked a summer camp in Louisiana a few years ago, and those teens know they are my kids. One of them even asked me to be her confirmation sponsor. So I love Mia so much. Like, she's just one of my favorite people. But I don't know that would be part of my story. I mean, if it is, then, it's perfectly fine. But I would make sure that child has strong male figures. Because I definitely don't want to, be a single mom in the sense of they don't have positive male figures in their lives, even though I'm not married, So I would be very intent on doing that, and I would try to make sure that I'm a part of a community where I know that there are strong male figures, if I ever did that. But I don't know if I don't know if it's in the cards for me. If it was, then I would be happy to do so. But I have kids all over the place already. Please. Yeah.
Have you written?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Have you written a book about your journey?
I've been asked to. I've been asked to. I think I have my foot in the door with Ignatius, and they're kind of like my dream publishing company. So I think I still think I have like a few more years to live, a little more life experience before people start listening to me about anything I have to say. I would love to at some point, though. So.
And my other question is, was there anyone in your family that you didn't feel like you could come out to? Anyone that you haven't come out to and how have they reacted for the most part?
I think my parents were just really confused. I think that they just really didn't know what to do. And I think there's still some hesitancy. I think maybe in the 7 or 8 years that I've been out, they've spoken to me about it maybe 3 times. And that's collectively, so my dad once, my mom twice. But I don't know if my grandmother, my mom's mom actually passed in May. I don't know that she ever knew. She knew that I went around and I spoke, but she didn't know the subject matter. And I often wondered if my parents never told her because they didn't know how she would react. And part of me actually regrets that now because, I don't know if she would have received it well, but at the same time, maybe she would have been proud, but we never gave her that opportunity. So there's still a tinge of regret in that. But I think that most of my family came to know because of my public ministry. So my public ministry actually started after my parents knew, my sister knew, but my public ministry started before I made any big announcement. And truth be told, I didn't feel the need to make an announcement. For one, because it was nobody's business. Nobody. I don't owe anybody that information. But by nature of me being a public figure, I feel like a lot of people eventually came to know. Whether or not they talked to me about it or not, nobody really talks to me about it, at least in my family. But I'm assuming people know. It was kind of like a weird circumstance just because I almost became a public figure on the topic first, and then everything else kind of followed suit. Yeah.
So how does that make you feel that nobody talks to you about it? How does that make you feel?
Odd. Odd. Only because I feel like it's still taboo in a way. And I have to kind of separate myself that just because they don't want to talk to me about that doesn't mean that they're rejecting me, So even I have to, kind of keep that separation in mind. I don't know. Part of me wishes they would talk to me about it more. But, at the end of the day, it's not the only facet of my personality or experience. So I try not to take it too personally. Maybe they just don't know how to speak about it and are trying to figure that out. Not really. They've kind of asked me in relation to, like, how do you feel about never being married? Or, like, do you still want to be married? Like, that question has definitely come up. But anything else, they haven't spoken to me about it. I try to kind of keep that separation. Maybe they just don't know to talk about it. But my parents have never seen me speak before. So, like, I've actually, the only time I've ever spoken in Mobile was in, like, Fairhope, which is in one of the neighboring towns. And I spoke there, but my parents weren't able to see it. It was kind of like a closed thing just for that parish. But they've never seen me speak before. So maybe that will, open the conversation a little bit. So maybe one day. Yeah, please.
So were you ever away from the Catholic Church because of this?
In practice, no. In heart, yes. I think I had abandoned God in my heart a long time before, any of this had ever happened. I think I was just confused. I was angry. And then I didn't know what to do. Nobody was here to really talk to me about that. And even, Father Dan got to me when I was a senior, so I was 18 at the time. But I had been struggling with this for a good, 6-7 years prior to that. So a lot of that chunk of time, at least in the beginning, I spent not really talking to anyone about it. So it was excruciatingly isolating as an experience, for sure.
You
Yeah.
mentioned your grandmother was Baptist.
Yeah,
but-
my other grandma, my dad's mom was Baptist. yeah.
Okay, but you said your parents were Catholic?
Yes.
So did your father convert, or how did all that?
So my dad's dad is Catholic. His mom is Baptist. So he was born and raised Catholic. Bye, guys. Thank y'all for coming. Thank you. Oh, give it up for Peyton, by the way. I love this girl so much. yeah. Yeah. So I was fortunate enough, like both my grandfather on my mom's side on my dad's side is Catholic. My grandmother on my mom's side, the one who passed, was Catholic. She was actually a convert, and I didn't know this until about a year before she passed. She was, like racial tensions in Alabama during her era were terrible, and she was a nurse, but she had to be educated in Selma. Because they wouldn't educate her in Mobile as a nurse. But she actually was educated by a group of nuns. And then like a priest, like she said that she absolutely fell in love with. And she converted because of them, I want to say. So, and then my grandfather on my mom's side was also Catholic. He was like French Catholic, so like long lineage of Catholics. So Catholicism has been in my family for generations, I want to say, at least on that side. So, literally, a couple friends of mine came over for a Labor Day party a few years ago, and my friend Amanda came up to me and was like, "Is this a Most Pure Heart of Mary family reunion?" And I was like, "What? No! Like, why would you say that?" And she was like, "Everybody from Most Pure Heart of Mary is here." And I like looked around and I was like, "Yeah, every single one of these people is a parishioner of Most Pure Heart of Mary, because that's all my mom's family." For the most part. So whenever they say light-skinned black Catholics in Mobile, they're like, they must be Avera's kinfolk. So, yeah, I have a very big Catholic family, at least on that side.
So first, I just want to thank you for all that you've said. I think
Thank
it's
you.
very important. I think we need to remember how important community, our Catholic Church is, how important it is to reach out to each other, especially, as you said, when you see somebody that's alone. But along those lines, I've been a Catholic all my life. I'm very happy to be Catholic, strong Catholic. My youngest son is gay. I'm very, very proud of him. I love him so much. And I know it's not what the church teaches, but I hope he finds a partner. And I hope that he finds strength in sharing his love.
Yeah.
And I guess that's all I
Yeah.
want to say. I just feel like that's important for people, most people, to have someone to love,
Yeah.
besides his brothers and sisters.
For
and
sure.
parents.
Absolutely. And I want to thank you for saying that. Not only, so that we can hear, but it's honest. Like it is a very honest hope, especially the hope of a mother. Like really only a mom really, really hopes for things like that. And I want to draw our attention a little bit. The devil is not an idiot. Like he is incredibly intelligent. And one of the things that he's used time and time again is he takes the words of God and he twists them ever so slightly. And he's just enough to confuse us. So I think the lie that he's perpetuating here is that, so God is telling you that you can't have someone to love? That's the lie, right? There it is. It's right there. Is God telling you that you can't have someone in your life to love? Now, I will say this. I am called to love as much as anyone else. Like my home parish is Little Flower Parish. Is Saint Therese of Lisieux. She said, my vocation is to love. My vocation is to love, right? So I think that there is very tangible ways to have people in our lives to walk with where there is no romantic or sexual element. Because just because romance or sex is not there does not mean that it is not love. Yeah. We are. We're sexual beings. Yeah. We are sexual beings. However, that is not the fullness of what we're called to. Sex is a base level thing. It's very base. Like, again, our priests take that vow of celibacy, for the life of the church. In a way, like if I choose to do it, I could take a vow of celibacy for the life of the church. You know, like I may never do it. You know, I could die at 30 and never do it. You know, but that does not mean that my virginity or my celibacy can't be used for the life of the church. Now, it is a cross to give up sex. I will say that. It is a cross. But again, sex is not all that I'm meant for. And it is not the only expression of love. There are much higher forms of love. There are much, much, much higher forms. And I understand that we are sexual beings, right? And I understand, believe me, I get it, that it is a cross to give up that element. However, me giving that up does not mean that I am not capable, or I'm not capable of receiving love in the highest of forms. You know, so I only say this to you because I see your heart as a mom. And I know that you want the best for your son. But if I could speak to you as someone who experiences this very intimately, I will say that do not lose hope that there is true love, self-sacrificial love for your son. Just as there's real love out there for me. And I see opportunities for that everywhere, every single day, right? And I have friends, right, that I'm not intimate with, but that I'm very, very close to. You know, like from priest to one of my best friends in the world is a permanent deacon. You know, and his wife and his daughters, like to see the way that he loves his wife is one of the most beautiful things. And as a permanent deacon, to see the way that he loves his congregation, it's so, so incredible. And maybe I'll never, you know, have a relationship like he has with Javonda, his wife, but there is still intimacy and love for me. It just may look different. No, that's all I would say about that.
Any last questions? Okay.
Are you acquainted with an organization that I believe is approved by the church called Courage and
Yes,
Courage?
yeah, I've spoken at the National Courage Conference
Oh,
before,
have you?
actually. Yes, I've been a Courage member. I'm not super active in a chapter anymore. There's not one locally to where I am. But Father Philip Bachansky, the executive director of Courage, is a friend. Like I've been involved with Courage for a number of years, and I swear by it. I absolutely love the organization. Hopefully, I'm able to go to the national conference. I believe it'll be in July of this year. But I absolutely love it. If you've never heard of it, Courage has existed for well over 40 years. It was started by Father John Harvey, and he was assisted by, if any of y'all watched EWTN, it's Father Benedict Groeschel. CFR actually helped Father John Harvey start the first Courage chapter. But it is a ministry that ministers to people who experience same-sex attraction, you know, like offers fellowship and different things like that. There's also another branch called Encourage, which is for parents, family members, friends, even spouses of somebody who's experienced the same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria. It was far approved by the church. Even John Paul II had incredible words to say about Courage. So he said it was necessary for these times.
And I have to apologize to Lori, who printed out all the stuff for Courage and Courage. I can grab that from your office. It's on
Okay,
it is on the website for the the white page we created for today for her coming to talk. You can find more information about Courage and Encourage. I'm going to hand the mic back because she wanted to ask her question.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make sure you all knew there was
Yeah.
information available for both of those things on the website.
I know Father Anthony was supposed to be in charge. I saw that. There are only 3 priests in the area that really work with
For this,
Courage
yeah.
and Courage. I'm understood. I don't know the other 2.
Yeah.
The reason I ask you is that my daughter as a layperson, is very involved with it in Atlanta.
Okay. Yeah.
Her daughter has come out as being gay, 24 years old in Virginia, the only daughter she has. And I believe that a lot of this, we've always had same-sex attraction among us, I understand that. But I think the media has done a terrible job.
Yes.
And it's almost become a cult.
Oh yeah.
At
Oh,
13
yeah.
years old, everybody's doesn't like their body. I don't care if they're
Yeah.
male or female. And then, but to go and say, I think I'm a girl or I would want to be a boy. And I do think some of the laws that are coming out
Yeah.
to put a halt on that is very good. I don't understand
Yeah.
the trans element of this at all.
That is, I will say, is a lot more complicated and I think a lot more complex. I never had very strong feelings. Like, I was definitely a tomboy. You know, I was always like, order me the boy toy at McDonald's. I want to shop in the boys section for my soccer uniform, or my soccer shoes. I played soccer on an all-boys team. Like, I was one of the only girls, like, playing soccer, at least at a younger age, you know, when it didn't matter as much. But I will say this, transgender, or at least gender dysphoria or gender discordance, is a very real thing. It is a mental illness. You know, it is a mental illness. But that does not mean that we try to, there's 2 points to this. We're not supposed to aid them in the delusion. You know, it would essentially be like saying, like, oh, somebody who's schizophrenic, don't do anything. You know, don't try to, like, those people are real to him, so we should accept that they're real. That's not loving. That's not compassionate. That's not any of those things. It also doesn't mean that we're just outright cruel to them or try to, like, ostracize these people or say, like, don't come anywhere near me. Like, don't come, like, I don't want anything to do with you, any of that. Like, and I'll say this, the media is doing, as you say, they're doing a terrible job. They're actually doing an excellent job at the wrong thing. They're doing a phenomenal job of completely and utterly brainwashing people. Now, I have a friend who actually wrote a fantastic book. The book is called Why I Don't Call Myself Gay. It's written by a man named Daniel Mattson, who was a tremendous friend of mine. I absolutely love the man. But he explained that there was something that he said in his book that I thought was so profound. Is he said that if you change the way that people speak, you change the way that they think. And if you change the way that they think, you control them. Mind control is a very real thing. It's just not putting a hat on somebody and hooking up a bunch of things to their brain. It is changing the way that people think, not only about others, but about themselves. Right? And I'll say this too. Most of the people who are saying they're bi or they're gay or they're trans aren't. They just have a very twisted understanding or, like, discordance of who they are, right? One of the things that I actually started doing, and Father's going to put me through a CrossFit workout tomorrow, is one of the things that I started doing was I started working out. Because I noticed that one of the things that I was very discontent with was my body. Or, like, was the way that I thought that people saw me. I was just like, oh, I just feel gross all the time. But I'll tell you this, I've only lost about 5 pounds, but I have noticed my body almost completely change over the course of the past 5 months. And I only say this because it is absolutely profound the way that our mental, our spiritual, and our physical faculties are all connected. Are all connected. If my prayer life is slacking, my mental clarity is off. If my mental clarity is off, I can't work out very well. If I haven't worked out in 2 weeks, I can't sleep. You know, or just all of these are so heavily interconnected. And if we are not taken care of as holistically as possible, we're ruined. You know? And it's amazing how these mental games affect us physically and can affect how we see ourselves physically. You know, I saw it, like, I'm on TikTok. I really shouldn't be, but my sister sends me hilarious things all the time. But there was a girl who said that she's dating this guy. This guy is 18 years old. She told him, like, do you know that you're loved? And she said this boy, 18 years old, cried so hard that he had a nosebleed on her dress. Like, he cried so profusely because someone told him that they love him. This boy was 18 years old and had apparently never heard that. Never heard that he was worthy of love. Right? I can't imagine the damning effects that must have, not only on a young boy, on anyone. We are taught to despise ourselves, to literally be like, there's always something wrong. And I think that that's what the social contagion is when it comes to like Instagram and TikTok, is we see people who are photoshopping themselves. I guarantee you these models don't even look like themselves. This is airbrush. This is Lightroom. Okay, this is filters. They don't even look like themselves. When I was going to a personal trainer a few years ago, he literally told me, he showed me a picture of this girl who he used to go to high school with. She was a model out in California. There was probably like a scientific like thing that could be asserted that she was one of the most beautiful women on the planet. Like easily. Like I was just like, oh my gosh, she is so beautiful. And he said, yeah, she's also the most insecure person you will ever meet in your entire life. If you don't love yourself at your worst, you're not going to love yourself at your best. You will always find ways to nitpick at yourselves. And that's what our kids are learning how to do. Truthfully, I think it's the community thing that we talked about, right? It's like making a distinct effort to tell them, like, you are loved. You know, even if they say, mom or cousin or auntie, stop telling me that, tell them anyway. Make it a priority to tell them how loved they are. Or, oh, you look so beautiful. Like you're so beautiful. You're such a great person. They're not hearing this. They're hearing, unless you look like her, you're not good enough. A girl who doesn't even look like that herself. Right? So in our communities, when we know we have these young people who are dealing with things like this, we need to make concerted efforts to tell them these things, to assure them that they are loved, that they are taken care of, you know, that they have people in their corner. And also, maybe create spaces where they can just tell all. You know, because one of the reasons I don't think I told my parents for a long time is because I thought that something was going to pop off. You know, that I was going to be kicked out. You know, or I was going to be shamed. You know, like the whole idea of like, you know, do this because I told you to, bull for them. You know, it's a very monkey see, monkey do type thing. So if you are constantly reassuring to them, not only that you love them, but acting like it, you know, doing things, like they see you. They see everything that you do. They see how you engage with others. They might see your Facebook profiles. So if you say X, Y, and Z on Facebook, but you don't act the same way in person, they notice that. So all it comes down to is loving ourselves enough to love others, you know, loving God enough to love others, because at the root of all of this is sin, right? At the root of all of this, this whole conversation is just about sin and how to overcome it. And love conquers all. So it's learning to love ourselves first, or love God first, then love ourselves, then go out and love others, right? It has to be in that order, because I guarantee you can't give something you don't have. So if you don't love yourself first, you have nothing.
So Vera, I want to thank you for coming. I know we have some people who we're expecting an hour, but this conversation's been great, so I've been letting it continue to move forward. But I want to make sure we wrap up, so those who might need to get home, have work in the morning, all those things, I have a feeling you're going to want to stick around for a second. So if anyone would like to continue the conversation, just come up, ask her questions, have some conversations, please feel free. But can we give her a round of applause one more time? And we thank you for being here with us tonight. Have a wonderful night and drive safe.